Hello, all my friends in TV land. This is Senior Issues, etc., and I'm your host, Vita Verdon. Now, I've got a very informative show for you tonight, so hurry up, get your cup of coffee, come, have a seat. This show's for you. Now, the guest that I have on this show, we met in kind of an interesting way. He's a lawyer, and he's going to give us some very informative things that we as seniors should know. He's been on here before, and we're going to welcome him back. We're just so happy he could come on this date. And his name is Bob Monahan, and he practices law in the Gurney area.
Good
Hi,
to
Bob.
see you again, Vita.
Nice
Thank
to
you.
have you back. So, back about a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago, there was some feature articles in the paper, and I got a couple calls from you, and we ended up, Gloria, you and me, having breakfast together, and you did come on the show, and we've been friends ever since. We just clicked just like that. And I know at that time that you were doing a podcast, a radio show.
A radio show and a podcast, right.
And a podcast on everyday law.
Mm-hmm.
But you had not jumped into the television land.
Not TV land, not till we met. After we met, I decided to give it a try.
And so you came on the show and you liked it, and since then you have really advanced. Why don't you just look right into that camera and tell them what you have now?
All right.
You have.
Well, gee, where to start? First
Well,
of all, we met when you were there. There was that great spread in the newspaper about your show, Senior Issues, etc.
Right.
Right. And then we met for coffee or breakfast with Gloria and Phil.
Right.
And then I came on your show in January,
The
and now I'm on
first-
again in December. So
So
we're
you're
we're
bookends.
bookends.
Right.
Yeah, we're bookends.
Yeah.
With me.
Yeah.
And I had such a good time on your show. I thought it was so fun, and my friends liked it, and my family liked it. By the way, hello, Maria, my wife, my lovely wife. We have to do that, right?
And your kids.
And James, my oldest boy, right?
Right.
And Jack, my middle boy, and Emily, my baby girl.
Your baby girl.
I love you all, right?
Good.
So we have to do that,
We have
right?
to
That's
do-
a
that's
tradition.
traditional,
Tradition.
right.
But I had such a good time on your show that we talked about it, I think, and you said I could get my own show if I wanted to.
Well, you have that kind of personality. I could just tell.
So I talked to the guy at the station here, Dan, and he said, yeah, that would be fine. So I started shooting a show. It's not with a big crew like your crew. I mean, you have Joe here and Gloria and Sharon, and you have everybody here and Phil, but I just have me and another guy named Ed, and we shoot at Lamb's Farm. Okay, we shoot at Lamb's Farm, and we've done a show on Mike Nierheim, the state's attorney. We've done a show on real estate law. What else have we done? We've done a show on small claims and wills and trusts, which we're going to talk a little bit about today, I think, right? Yeah. And I love it. It's a lot of fun. I've
Now,
enjoyed.
do you have a website?
I have a website. My website is www.monahanfirm.com. Okay.
So you have a website, and so is your podcast, your radio show on your website?
And I still do the radio show.
Yeah.
So I do a radio show and a TV show, and I put the radio show comes out as a podcast that's available on the internet, and the TV show I put on YouTube like you do, and on my website. So I'm everywhere.
So if you go onto your website, you can see the time the different things could be heard and seen.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good thing. Well, what I'd like us to get into is us as seniors, there's some very important legal data that we should do in our elder years. Now, what would you call this data? Is it called
An estate plan.
planning?
An estate plan.
Now, what is an estate plan? I'm not sure.
An estate plan is a plan for your future.
Okay.
What you'd like to have happen to your assets.
Okay.
How you'd like them distributed when you pass away to heaven.
Well, what does it constitute? Is it a will?
Oh, sure, sure.
It's a will.
The
and
main
it's
parts would be
power
a
of
will for sure.
A will for
A
sure.
will for sure. Powers of attorney. There's two flavors of powers of attorney.
What do you mean two flavors?
There's one for health care,
Okay.
and that's separate and different than the one for your property.
Oh, I see.
And the last thing is some people want a trust mainly to avoid probate. And let me think about how we can talk about all these things, because there's a lot here. So basically, a basic, simple estate plan would consist of a will,
A will.
a power of attorney for property,
Okay.
a power of attorney for health care,
Okay.
and maybe a trust to help you avoid probate.
Okay. Now, are these all separate packages, or is this one package?
One package generally. You would,
And it's,
one attorney would draft all of these together.
It has to go through an attorney.
You know, a lot of people ask me that because there are ways to do it without an attorney.
You're talking about making a will.
Making a will yourself, right. There's a product called LegalZoom or Rocket Lawyer, and they have advantages and disadvantages. We can talk a little about that if you'd like.
Okay, what is the advantage? It's cheap.
It's cheap.
Yeah, that's one advantage.
LegalZoom, you can draft a will with LegalZoom for $69. $69, the cost of a pair of sneakers. And it's convenient. You can do it kind of from the comfort of your home. And what it does is on the computer screen, it'll ask you questions. You answer the questions as best you can. And then it'll print out your document there at home from your printer in a PDF format, which is something you can print out from any printer.
So what would be the disadvantage?
Well, before you do it, you can take out your own appendix too, but I wouldn't advise it, right? There's context behind these documents that you need to know before you start. And I think not everyone may take the time to educate themselves about the context behind what these documents do and what they're for. For example, a will only covers some of your assets. You may draft a will and think you're done. You think you've drafted your will, I have my peace of mind, my LegalZoom will is drafted, it's in the safe deposit box, I'm done, and thank goodness for $69 I got such a great value. But did you know that there are certain assets a will covers and certain assets it doesn't cover, okay? So let me say it this way. Different assets, different kinds of assets pass differently on death, okay? So a joint account, for example, passes automatically to the other joint owner. So if you're married and you own your house jointly with your spouse, when one spouse dies, it automatically passes by operation of law to the other, and the will does not cover it. The same thing with life insurance. Life insurance policies is a contract asset. It's a different kind of asset. It's not covered by the will. That passes to your beneficiary without the will ever coming into play. But something like if you're a widow or a widower and you own your house without a joint owner, that is a probate asset. And when you die, that means the will would govern it in probate court. Okay? So that's one thing you need to know. The first thing you need to know is, I have this will, what's covered by it? For example, when you do an estate plan with a lawyer, he'll go over your life insurance policy and anything else that has a beneficiary and make sure, boy, who is this life insurance proceeds going to go to? Is it my ex-wife? Did I forget to change it after my divorce? Is it split among all my kids? Did I leave one of my kids out by accident? Did one of my kids come into being after I named my beneficiaries? Who gets it? So an estate planning attorney not only sits down with you and gives you the context.
But behind the context, what is the weight? Oh, I see. I see what you're saying. But I think we should have all this information so that a person can make a decision on that.
Right, right. And do you know what else? Just so you know, we talked about the will a little bit.
Okay.
Can we talk about the powers of attorney? The
powers of attorney, I know that is a very tricky.
You should absolutely have those in place.
Right.
Right? And what a power of attorney does is it governs your wishes. It appoints your agent to execute your wishes if you become incapacitated. So your will is for when you pass away.
Okay.
When you're up in heaven. Your powers of attorney are for when you're here on earth, but you can no longer make decisions.
Say if a person gets dementia.
Dementia, early Alzheimer's, an accident that leads to a coma. Anything where you can't make decisions anymore. How's your doctor going to know what you want?
So that's something that a person isn't aware of when they're doing their own.
When they're doing their will.
When they're doing the will or the powers of attorney.
They may not know they need powers of attorney. They may think, my will's done, I'm done, and then they get in an accident and can't make decisions anymore. And what would have to happen is their family would have to go to court and apply for what's called a guardianship, okay? To be appointed the guardian then to make decisions about the property and health care decisions of the disabled person. And it's very expensive. And a power of attorney can be very inexpensive, and you can do it like that.
Well, that's what we have you here for, Bob.
That's what
so we could get all this information out. Now what I'm going to go to is my pearls of wisdom.
Okay.
Now we're still in this enrollment season, so you still have time. Now a year ago, what I did is I had someone from SHIP, you know, that's Senior Health Insurance Plan. They're a part of Medicare. Now you can personally go to your library and find out where there are SHIP representatives, and they will guide you through it. Or you can go into my website, and I have a show on this that will give you information. That's seniorissuesetc.org, and then just look for the SHIP show, and it'll give you all the information. Or if you want to, you can go on your own right into Medicare, and Medicare will give you all the options, because that's what SHIP does, and that's what any person that's advising you, they will go right into that website. So there's still a little time in December for open enrollment, and there's been many changes on not only the supplementary policies, but there's been many changes on Medicare. So it's good to go and look in there and see. I know that somebody from my show here who works on my website, he went in on his own, and he saved for him and his wife, I think almost $2,000. So it's worth it during this enrollment period to check out what you have and to know how to do it. And I'm wishing all of you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and that you have a really good holiday season. You know, our heart is with you, and be careful, because this is the time when we're just going to get ice on the ground, and you don't want to take a fall. And you know, if you're going to have to get a cane, I'm going to show you. I've showed you this before. They have them at any medical center. What I have is a cane with this 4-prong rubber things at the bottom, and that gives you a lot more support, and it will stand up like on its own. So any medical supply house has them. I think they're relatively inexpensive. I think I paid about $49 for this one, but they're well worth it to avoid any kind of fall. And also, be sure, like, the soles of your shoes are not really slick, because if you need to have the right kind of shoes, and you really need to have the right kind of socks. I'm so conscious of this, you know, I can't emphasize it enough. And make a clear path at night when you're getting up, if you have to go to the washroom, that there isn't any carpet that you can slip your foot under. So be careful, be safe, and have a good holiday season. Now we're going to get back to all this information that we need. All right, so now on this power of attorney, we've gone through that. That's a slippery slope. That's all I can say about it.
How do you say that? What do you mean?
A slippery slope, that if we don't know what we're doing.
Right.
That's what I'm talking about, a slippery slope, that we're not really protecting ourselves in the right way. That's why we need to have this kind of information.
There's one other thing I wanted to say, because there's a common misconception about wills that's not true. Okay? And that's that a will avoids probate. That if you have a will, you naturally avoid going to probate court, and you don't need to see a judge. Okay? And it's almost the case that the opposite is true. If you have a will, you have to go to probate. Did you know that a will by itself is not what you would say an effective document? You can't take your will to the bank, okay? Your executor, okay? So one thing a will does is it appoints an executor to make the decisions about your estate that need to be made, make sure your instructions in your will are followed, your debts are paid, and the distributions are made to your heirs.
Oh, I see.
But the executor can't take the will to the bank and say, well, I'm here, Joe passed away, and I'm here with Joe's will, and I'd like to empty out the bank account to distribute to his heirs. The teller at the bank would say, well, that will doesn't do anything. That's not the effective document. What we need here at the bank are called letters of office. Letters of office are the effective document, and to get letters of office, to have control over the assets of the estate, you need letters of office from the probate court. And before you can get letters of office from the probate court, you need to take the will to probate court, show it to the judge, make sure the judge knows all the formalities were followed in drafting the will, and then if the judge approves of the will, she'll issue the letters of office that you can then take to the bank, get the money from Joe's account, and pay the debts and make the distributions to his heirs, and then close the estate. So a will doesn't avoid probate, and everyone thinks, oh, I have a will, all my needs are taken care of, I won't have to go to probate court, and none of that is accurate. Yeah, so you can draft your own will, but one thing I tell people is that if you draft your own will without the help of a lawyer, you're definitely going to need lawyers at the end, and you might as well start the process, make a relationship with a lawyer that can guide your loved ones when you pass on through the process, and he'll know how to help your family. So that's what I like to tell people. Yeah.
Well, let's go through a little overview now. Now, what we're talking about is estate plan.
An estate plan. Yeah.
Okay, an estate plan. Okay, so an estate plan consists of this will.
The will.
Okay, and the will has, you have to have the legality to it.
Right, it has to have 2 witnesses, notary. There's a lot of language that needs to be in it for it to be effective and good.
All right, and now, and you need the power of attorney.
And they're different, one for health care and one for property. Because you may want different people. You may have a very skilled friend with finance, and you want that person to control your finances if you become incapacitated, because you may come out of that coma and he may have enriched you by $100 or $1 million or whatever it may be, right? Because he's good with money. But you may want a very close relative that knows your wishes to take care of your health care needs if you become incapacitated.
So you do need two separate...
You need 2 separate documents. Yeah? So again, there's the will, there's the power of attorney for health care, the power of attorney for property. One thing we talked a little bit about but didn't really flesh out was what a trust is.
Yeah, what is a trust?
Do we have time to talk about it?
I think so.
Okay, good.
Well, if we don't, we'll just cut you up. But
okay, good, good. So a trust is a document that owns property for you, okay? So what that means is you put the property, it's like a bowl of candy, okay? And do you remember how I said that if you're a widow or a widower and you own your home yourself, that's a probate asset. It's because you own it. You're on the title.
Right.
Only you are on the title. Okay. So if someone wants to sell that house, someone has to be able to sign that title.
Yeah.
But if Joe owns the house and he's dead, no one can sign the title but his executor. Okay?
Right.
So the executor, so it's a probate asset because it has a title in Joe's name only. Okay? But a trust is like a bowl that holds the candy. It holds the house. Okay? And you put the house into the trust, and then the trust is no longer owned by Joe, it's owned by the trust. Okay? And the trustee of the trust is Joe while he's alive. Okay? So Joe is the trustor, meaning he gives the house to the trust. He becomes the trustee of the trust, so he controls all the property in the trust.
Okay.
But it's no longer in his name. The home is in the name of the trust. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You with me so far? Okay. So what you do is Joe names the successor trustee to the trust, you, Vita. So when Joe passes away, you step into Joe's shoes as the trustee. And you follow the instructions of the trust, which probably say you liquidate the house and distribute it to Joe's heirs.
Oh, so that's why people have a trust.
A trust is not, yes, to hold your, it's a probate avoidance technique.
Yeah.
It's not because you're wealthy and you have so many assets that you're a trust fund baby and you don't need to work. A trust is a probate avoidance tool where you put an asset that normally would land you in probate court, and this will keep you out of probate court because technically, for example, Joe no longer owns it. It's owned by the trust, and it doesn't need to go in probate because when Joe dies, you become the successor trustee and follow the instructions of the trust, and it keeps you out of probate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does.
It's complicated. I know it's maybe too complicated for such a short span, but I tried to be brief and explain it as best I could.
Well, as seniors, what is the one thing you think that people just goof up on that they don't take care of? Would it be the will?
So you know, if you ever make a trust by yourself, you also need a will. And people think, you know what the number one goof up is?
What is it?
You spend all this time on an estate plan.
Okay.
You draft a will that's called a pour-over will that when you die pours everything that's not in the trust into the trust. You draft your power of attorney. You draft your power of attorney for healthcare and property, and you draft a trust, right? But the one thing you forget to do is fund the trust. That means take your house and title it in the name of the trust. By itself, unless you retitle your assets into the name of the trust, it doesn't hold anything. It's like an empty bowl. And then when you die, all that work you did to avoid probate, you're in probate. And the probate process isn't terrible. I mean, it's lengthy, it's costly, and it's not. It requires a lot of bookkeeping and detail-oriented work. So people don't. If you can avoid probate, a lot of people would like to. But there are advantages to going to probate too.
Well, what is the bulk of the work that you do legally?
You know, legally, I do two kinds of work.
Yes.
Just so you know, I don't know if I told you that,
No.
but I do injury work as well as estate planning.
Oh.
And it was the injury work that got me into estate planning.
I see.
Did you know I had this one summer where I had two injury cases that were deaths. So I had two clients who were killed in car accidents.
Oh.
I represented their families. And because the injured party, the dead party, I had to open estates for them because they died without wills. It's called dying intestate. So during that process, I learned all the rules that you needed to know to administer an estate in probate court. And that's how I got into probate and learning about wills and trusts, because I started with injury work, and I still do a lot of injury work. And injury work is basically car accidents, falls, any kind of medical accident. But the bulk would be car accidents. The drivers are terrible these days. I think it's so unsafe to drive.
Now that you do your legal work, and how does this fit in with your television show and your radio show?
You know, I find in my work, people are more nervous than I would ever guess coming to see me. And I like to think I'm a friendly guy. I'm not intimidating.
They're nervous to come and see you as a lawyer, you mean?
Yeah.
What do you think makes them so nervous?
Well, I think, one, we have a bad reputation. Lawyers in general, I think, have a bad reputation. So one thing I like to think of my shows doing is spotlighting the good lawyers in the community.
Well, the thing, I've watched your Everyday Law, and the thing that I have found out that has helped me is sort of like taking the mystery away, and you bring it into everyday language. You know, and that's a really good thing.
There's so many things that, for example, people, I have lawyers that are great lawyers that care about their clients, but when I talk to them about what they do, sometimes I say, well, do you tell your clients you're doing that when you're doing it? And they're like, oh, I tell them at the end what's going on, but you know, I have a judge friend. He's a retired judge. And you know what he told me? He said, it's not enough to care about your client. You have to show your client how much you care. And you know what he said to do? He said to call your client every week, whether you have news for them or not. Just call them and say, I'm calling to say hello. and to see if you have any questions. Nothing's changed since we last spoke, and if you have any questions, you can reach out to me at any time. And he says that shows your client not only that you're working on their case, but that you care about them, and that's really important. So I think people are very intimidated by lawyers because it's almost like a priesthood that has secret knowledge that we don't want other people to know. And my show, I think, tells people this is what your real estate lawyer is doing. That she's working on your taxes, the property taxes, and the prorations. She's working on the real estate contract and making sure everything's in order in your real estate contract. When you have your real estate closing, this is all the documents you're going to sign. And like you say, I try to take the mystery out of it so that people aren't as scared and intimidated by lawyers.
Well, I think the name of it, Everyday Law, that you've brought it down to our language, that it isn't this elite language that only lawyers know.
Thank you. That's what I try to do.
Yeah.
Like bring it down from the secretive priesthood that wants to hold on to its secrets to let everybody know what's going on, and then they feel safer and more comfortable, and I hope it's good public relations for the legal community.
Well, what's the best piece of advice you would give to seniors that they should legally? What's the best bit of advice? Just look into that camera and tell them.
You know what I think it is?
Give them your heart.
Everyone should have a good lawyer in their life.
Right.
Everyone should have a good lawyer in life, just like you should have a good accountant.
You should have a good doctor.
A good doctor.
Right.
A good priest or rabbi or minister, whatever it may be. But you should have a good lawyer in life, especially any time you're doing something where money's changing hands. Where money's changing hands, especially if it's a good sum, talk to a lawyer to protect yourself. Because so many seniors can get taken advantage of by unscrupulous contractors, unscrupulous sharks out there. And it doesn't hurt, before you part with your money, to build a ramp for a wheelchair, or an addition to your house, or some kind of bathroom addition, whatever it may be, to talk to a lawyer and just say, go over the contract so I'm protected. So I'm not ripped off in this transaction.
And you know what else that everybody viewing the show should have? During this holiday season, they should have a spiritually healthy, sound, safe holiday season. So what we do in unison, we wish them a Merry Christmas.
Amen. Amen.
We wish them a Merry Christmas, because the best is yet to come. And when you come to the end of your rope, you tie a knot and you hang on, because you know why? The best is yet to come. What we want you to do this week is catch the Spirit. And what we do is wish them a Merry Christmas. We wish them a Merry Christmas.
We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. What